course, because there's no way
Yeah.
that Trump can get a deal if he works with Netanyahu, because
Yeah.
Netanyahu is adamantly opposed to a deal. Israel
Mm.
and the lobby will go to enormous lengths to undermine the deal. This is the problem that Trump faces. He's caught between the pressure, this truly profound pressure from the international economy on one side, and Netanyahu, Israel, and the lobby on the other side.
This is perhaps a rhetorical question, but if this agreement proceeds more or less along the lines that have been leaked, would you characterize it as primarily a big strategic defeat for Israel?
Oh, this is a catastrophic defeat for Israel,
Yeah.
right? They know.
Because the original Israeli objective, let's just be clear for our audience, was not coexistence with a constrained Iran. It was about a permanent weakening of Iran's nuclear and regional capabilities, correct? And ballistic missile capabilities, John?
Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
similar to what we wanted to do to Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war. As you've
Yeah.
heard me say many times, we wanted to knock Russia out of the ranks of the great powers. I think in this particular case, what the Israelis really wanted to do, they talked about regime change, and I think they would have settled for regime change. But what they really wanted was to do to Iran what's been done to Syria, which is break it into pieces, cause a serious revolution that greatly weakened the state.
So what does all this mean for Netanyahu? He's presumably trapped politically because if he openly confronts Trump, I mean, couldn't he risk alienating a lot of Israeli voters who still strongly support Trump? But if he remains quiet at the same time, he risks appearing to acquiesce in this deal that doesn't help Israel. John?
He's in deep trouble because no matter what happens with Trump, he lost the war against Iran. Iran's not giving, these are the points you made before. Iran's not giving up its missiles, right? Its nuclear enrichment capability is going to remain intact. It's not giving up its support for Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah. And Iran is getting all sorts of relief. So he loses in the war in Iran. The war against Hezbollah in Lebanon is going terribly, independent of the Iran issue.
Tell us more about that, because that's not getting much play in the mainstream media. Israel's war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Tell us more, John.
Well, first of all, the terrain in southern Lebanon is ideally suited for the defender, and the defender in this case is Hezbollah. And when the Israelis went in there in 2006, they got clobbered by Hezbollah because Hezbollah used the terrain in southern Lebanon to ambush Israeli armored and infantry forces. But what's changed since then that makes Hezbollah even more effective is the coming of drones, because Hezbollah is using fiber optic drones. Those are drones that are very hard for the Israelis to jam to deadly effect. So the Israelis have been suffering significant casualties in southern Lebanon. And the other dimension to this, Tom, is that Hezbollah is firing every day large numbers of rockets and missiles into northern Israel. You remember a number of months ago, it looked like Hezbollah had been defeated. Israel had won a great victory. The table has now turned, and Hezbollah is back on its feet, and it's causing the Israelis huge problems, not only inside southern Lebanon itself, but also in terms of bombing North Israel. So if you look at the Lebanon war and just go to Hamas, I mean, there's no question that Hamas has been clobbered, and the Palestinians, of course, have undergone a genocide in Gaza. But the fact is that Hamas is still alive and still fighting. It would be too much to say Hamas is alive and well, but it's close to that point. So they haven't defeated Hamas, they haven't defeated Hezbollah, they haven't defeated Iran, and they've done enormous damage, this is the Israelis, to their reputation, not only around the world, but in the United States. It's quite stunning the extent to which people in the United States are now critical of Israel in ways that were unthinkable
But
5
surely the
years.
security intelligence in Israel and Washington before February 28 knew about Iran and its proxies' ability to fight back.
Tom, I think on February 27th, when Netanyahu and company and Trump and company were thinking about going to war the next day, they thought that Hezbollah had effectively been defeated. They did not know that it would come back from the
Right.
dead. Point number one. And point number two, they thought that they were going to win a quick and decisive victory. They thought a shock and awe air campaign, which had decapitation at the center of it, would produce a victory. And of course, as you remember, on February 28th, they did decapitate the regime in Iran. They succeeded. And furthermore, they did launch a shock and awe campaign that was quite shocking. But the problem is, it didn't work. And once that doesn't work, they're then in a long war. And then the whole question of the Strait of Hormuz being closed comes into play. You want to remember that beforehand, President Trump has said that he was warned about the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And he said, no need to worry because we're going to win the war quickly and it won't become an issue. Well, they didn't win the war quickly. It became an issue. And then to go back to Hezbollah, it came into the fight. And furthermore, Tom, there's one other very important point that I want to make. Reports have come out from the intelligence community via the Washington Post, the New York Times, that we, the United States, have suffered much greater damage to our military bases in the Persian Gulf than we realized, we in the public realized at first. But they're now telling us that our base structure really got clobbered. Now you say to yourself when you hear this, if they were deadly effective against our bases, doesn't that mean that it's highly likely that their attacks against Israel were deadly effective? Well, you remember we knew nothing, virtually nothing, about how much damage was done inside Israel during the bombing campaign because the Israelis did a brilliant job of keeping information about the consequences of the bombing from the rest of us. But we're now getting lots of information that Israel really got clobbered by those Iranian missiles, just like the American military bases in the region really got clobbered. It makes perfect sense. So you want to understand that Israel has paid a real price in terms of the damage that has been done by those Iranian missiles and drones that hit them.
And that's not to mention America's allies, the Sunni Gulf allies. You think of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar. How are they feeling right now? Because this deal may well embolden Iran, their nemesis.
Well, what's very interesting on this point, Tom, is that virtually every one of the GCC states, the 6 Gulf states, including the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, who are mortal enemies these days, all 6 of them begged the United States not to restart the bombing campaign for exactly the reason that you're alluding to. They understand full well that Iran has a second strike capability and they are in the crosshairs. And the Iranians, if enormous damage is done to Iran, the Iranians will do enormous damage to those 6 Gulf states. And they don't want that for all the obvious reasons.
John, let's conclude with where we're at. It's still uncertain, of course, how diplomatic negotiations proceed. But we should remember that the administration and the Israelis started this mission on February 28 with what's called maximalist objectives. So they wanted to cripple and destroy Iran's enrichment capability, especially following the June attacks last year. They wanted to weaken the missile infrastructure, the ballistic missile infrastructure. They wanted to roll back the regional proxies. We mentioned them before, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. And given that the regime is now likely to remain intact, And that enrichment capability, I know it's still a work in progress, but that may well be preserved. Sanctions relief on the table. I mean, how do you think future historians are likely to view this episode in history? John?
Well, I'll make a couple of points. One is the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, a year or two ago, commissioned some diplomatic historians, American diplomatic historians, to assess what was the greatest foreign policy blunder that the United States has ever made. This is obviously before the Iran War. And they concluded that the Iraq War in 2003, which you and I know all about, was the greatest blunder that the United States ever made. I think this decision to attack Iran on February 28th will far outdistance the Iraq 2003 war as the greatest foreign policy blunder the United States ever made. Second point I'd make in support of this is you want to remember that Robert Kagan, who is a hard-nosed and very smart neoconservative, who's an arch proponent of the 2003 Iraq War, has said that the decision to attack Iran on February 28th and involve the United States and Israel in this war was a catastrophic mistake. I think his view on how foolish this decision was is completely in line with my view and with your view. And all of this just tells you this, I think, will go down in the history books as a massive blunder.